Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Amy Prokopis. I am an author of young adult novels like the young adult science fiction novel The Arena and the young adult fantasy romance Guardians of the Sixth Gate. Thank you for clicking on my video. Welcome to those of you who are coming back, and welcome to the crew if you are new. So today we are talking about all of the books I want to write. So that's like a look at all of the books on my project log of all time. I made a list. It's quite a long list. Finn decided to draw on said list, and we are going to go through all of those books right now. Before we get started, let's talk a little about how I get my ideas. They come to me from all kinds of places. I'm especially inspired by nature, being outside, like my backyard. Love this backyard. To a degree, history really inspires me. I really like, especially in fantasy, I'm super interested in like the sociology behind society. So not necessarily history, but like how history is shaped by society. So sociology, I guess. I kind of just said sociology. I love that. Different cultures. I love to weave those kind of elements into my stories because that's really what makes up people and our beliefs. There are all these other grand stories. So those things really influence me. As far as how I go about deciding what projects to actually take on, because believe me, I have ideas all the time, but not all of them are good. So I usually jot all of them down and I can decide pretty quickly, even like as I'm writing them, if it's going to be something that I could make into a story that would be successful. And so a lot of that, writing them down, I start and then I'll just delete it, or I type it away and then I never look at it again, because the ones that I remember, I don't have to go back for. They're the ones that stick in my brain. So I don't ever have to look at those notes. It's just a big dump where I can put all of those ideas. And so those stories that I can automatically see development in, those get filed away later in a separate place. And I play with them as I go, as I need a break from whatever story I'm working on. I come back to that folder and I play with those different ideas and I further develop the world and some of those characters so that by the time I actually sit down to write one project, I don't actually have to do a ton of development because I've already done them throughout the years that project has been on my log. And a lot of them have been on my log a very long time. So let me tell you about some of those projects on my log. Just a quick note here, I am not going into too much depth about any of these projects because I am a little nervous about sharing too much information and potentially seeing my project be taken by somebody and then completely turned into a finished book before I can get around to it. So I'm not gonna give you guys too much details, but I'm gonna give you guys like an in a nutshell kind of glimpse. So that's my only note. Okay, now let's go back to the video. I'm gonna keep a running tab of all of these projects right here. That way we can keep track of them and you guys can follow along on the screen with me. The first project, of course, that I'm going to talk about is the Guardians of the Sixth Gate series. I'm gonna list them both here. I have my next book, which is called Shade of the Shadowlands. It comes out in this spring of 2023, and there is one more in the series, so I have 2 more books to write and publish. The third one I have not revealed the title to, so it will just be listed as book 3 here, but I want to finish writing out that series. That series is young adult fantasy. It's for people that might like supernatural. If you really like Twilight, this will be a little bit like that. And the Vampire Diaries, because there's all kinds of creatures in it. So I have that project to finish out that I'm hoping to finish out in this calendar year. So in 2023, I'm hoping I'll have that book finished by this time, or that series finished by this time next year. The next book that I want to work on, I'm already working on. So if you haven't already been able to tell, these are in no particular order. So the next one is Winter Witches. That is my witchy winter romance. So if you didn't know, you can currently read that. I'll put that here on Patreon for $5 a month. So that's pretty cool. But Winter Witches is the first of 3 books I have planned. So I have Winter Witches, which is Madison's story, Madison Sinclair, the eldest of 3 sisters. Then I have the second book in that series, which is her middle sister, Margot's story. And then I have a last one, which is the youngest sister. Her name's Marley Sinclair. I have her story planned. They all take place at Christmas time. I'm planning to write them every December, just like I am this year, as kind of like I write a book in 30 days project. So they will be published at Christmas time, I'm planning, for the next 3 Christmases. So obviously, none of these projects are exactly in the lineup, like the publishing order that they will end up being in. These are it's just the easiest way for me to talk about them as like a whole group. And I have loved Winter Witches. I love these 3 sisters. They're so different. So you'll be able to find one that you relate to. I'm loving it. It's reminding me a lot of growing up with my own sister, because these characters, the way they interact, it's very sibling-esque. It is adorable. And it's a romance. So instead of most of my fantasy stories where there's a fantasy plot and then the romance is the subplot, this one's flipped on its head. And the romance is the main plot. They just happen to be witches. So super fun. That book, I cannot wait for these to come out. They're so fun. They're much more light-hearted than the rest of my books. Next, I have a spin-off planned of Guardians of the Sixth Gate. It stars a character that appears in book 2 in Shade of the Shadowlands. I'm planning on expanding that story because the character is super interesting. It is a romance, and just like Winter Witches, it has more of a romance plot than a fantasy plot. But the fantasy plot is definitely there. It's a little darker of a tone. Winter Witches is light. It's a light romance with a little bit of magic tossed in there. Think like Hallmark witches. And Guardians of the Sixth Gate spinoff is more like Guardians of the Sixth Gate. So it's supernatural. The characters are not guardians in this one. They're actually supernatural beings. So it's really fun to explore that side of it. It has a darkness to it. The main character is really troubled due to just what the character is as far as a supernatural being. It's super fun. I get to play with gray, kind of like in gray areas. I get to play with a morally gray character and write about that, all under the guise of some romance, which is super fun. I'm hoping to start writing that one about this time next year. Well, not this time, because I'll be working on the second Winter Witches book, but I want to start prepping for that about this time of the year so that I'll be ready to publish it in another year. So there's that book. Right now, I'm not sure if it'll be 1 or 2 books, so that'll be noted over there in our little tally. I think it might be 2 books. I think it might be 2, but it's gonna depend on me sitting down and seeing how far this plot develops. I've already done a little bit. I know the kind of things I want to include in it, and I can see it being more than 1. I just don't know if I'm going to stretch it that far. So there's that book. Fun projects. A little deeper for me. I like it. When I first started publishing, the first book I published was this one, The Arena, which is science fiction romance. I love that book. It's been compared by some of the people who've read it to Divergent, a little bit like Dune also. The landscape is sort of the same, this desert landscape. So I love that book. I originally wrote it just kind of to experiment, being my first self-published book, and I fell in love with it. It's a little different for me, and I wrote it originally as a standalone, and my editor said that there were too many interesting storylines in here, and she wanted to know more about the world, and it would make for a good series. So I have 2 books planned for that. So there's the next one. So the next one I want to come back to is the second book in that series, the Arena book 2. I do have a title for that. I don't know that I want to release that yet, though. I'm going to hang on to that little nugget. So for right now, it'll be over here as the Arena book 2. This one explores the aftermath of the Arena. I'm not going to spoil too much about what happens in the Arena. And it also explores the device. So in the Arena, when you come of age in this world, in Galaterra, which is the nation that has now inhabited the planet of Alderia, when you come of age, everyone gets an implant. It's kind of like the size of, think of like if you took your Apple Watch and then implanted it behind your head, and it's a communication device, but the government has secretly been using it for like nefarious purposes. And the second book in the series explores that kind of thought control a little bit more, and also gets into more of like the political side of things as rulers are taking office, and as our 2 nations are more interwoven than ever. It's going to be super fun. I've already written part of the draft and it just wasn't working, so I'm going to scrap sections of it, but a lot of it's the same. So it's not a total rewrite, but it's a lot of a rewrite. So I want to come back to that book at some point. I have another witch series planned. I love witches. In case you didn't know, they're probably my favorite supernatural beings. I love them so much. So I have another witch series planned. I call it The Rosewood Witches. I wrote a first draft of this project, or half of one, a long time ago. Things were not quite working out, so I moved on to a new project. I still have it in my back pocket. I have some other things I want to do with it than what I originally was writing. And I don't know how many books this will be. When I first thought of the series, I could picture easily like 4 books, and I don't know if that's still the case now that I've tweaked it a little bit. I've definitely seen more than one. It is about a group of witches in a small Virginia town. And these witches are a little more traditional than some of the other witches I've written about in the past, more so than in the Guardian series, and definitely more so than my Winter Witches, where all of the witches, their powers are much more like Earth related, and they're connected to seasons. These witches are much more based in like old folklore. They have familiars, which is super fun. If you don't know what a familiar is, it's like witches and their black cats, essentially. So their familiars are connected to them in their powers in some way. So really like that. I want to come back to it because I think I have a couple characters in there that are super fun. And I've also played with the idea of connecting it to my Guardians of the Sixth Gate world. I don't know if I'm still going to do that. That would make it the 3rd spin-off book. I can see how I could connect it. And that's why I'm not sure how many books are going to be in the series yet, because it may not, I still have some development to do, obviously. So I'm still hanging on to that, and I plan on coming back to Rosewood Witches in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's connected to Guardians of the Sixth Gate or not, I don't know, but it is on the list. I have a project on my log that I very affectionately call my Romeo and Juliet with Dragons project. This one, I think there's going to be a little bit of magic in it, but it's not going to be anything that either of my characters possess. Actually, that's not true. One of my characters possesses a magical power, but it's not like anything she necessarily controls. It's super interesting, but the entire premise of the book is that there are 2 nations Romeo and Juliet, and we have our star-crossed lovers from those two nations, and there are dragons involved. The plot just kind of came to me one night. I was watching, what were we watching? Oh my gosh. We were watching a TV show on Amazon, like a Dungeons and Dragons TV show. Crap. Some of you guys are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. We were watching that, and the plot of this book just dropped in my head, and I started typing it away on my phone, and it's one that has stuck. I've never even had to go back to my notes because it has been so ingrained in my brain. So that one, my Romeo and Juliet with Dragons, I'm planning 2 books for, I can see where like the plots fall for both books. So that's one I'll come to. I cannot wait to write that. It's going to be more epic, just like some of my other books. It's going to be darker. There's going to be a certain amount of violence. It's going to be medieval-ish. So that setting, it'll be more medieval, but with the magical side of things. Whew, I really cannot wait to write it. I have already put away tidbits about characters. I'm in that stage where when I come back to this one on my project log, I'm doing lots of character development. So fun, love it. The last book that I want to talk about is a series. There are 4 books in it. I have already written all 4 of these at least once. A couple of them I've written 2 to 3 times. So let me explain. This series I have been writing since I was a kid. I think I started writing it when I was about 12 and have revised. It's gotten shorter. It used to be 6 books, now it's 4. But the characters and the original overarching story has been the same since then, which sounds wild. So this book is very dear to my heart. So for that reason, I'm not revealing the title of it because I'm fairly certain it'll be that title, but it's not going to come out for quite a while. I want to revise it. It falls under more of that epic fantasy umbrella. And it does involve magic. It's very fun, and it is the only book that I have written in a very long time. At least it's the only one on this lineup where the main character is a boy. So the main character is a boy. There are several characters in it, so they're not all male, but this is by far, I think, my favorite story. I just hold this character very dear. I grew up with him, as in I saw myself in him when I was a kid. And then as I got older, looking back, I viewed him as kind of my own son. And so that's influenced some of the way I wrote when I rewrote the books. And now that I'm a lot older, and I have all this author background, I see it a lot more clearly, and I know I can make this series amazing from the author standpoint now that I'm out here and not so much emotionally in the story. So love this book. Cannot wait to get around to publishing it. Like I said, I already have several drafts of most of them written. This book will probably not be written or even talked about with you guys for several years. I see this book more as maybe 3 years out. I originally wanted this to be my very first book when I was still looking at traditional publishing. That's how much I loved this book. I believe in it that much. And now that I'm getting started in self-publishing and have started on some other projects, this one is so big and will take me a little bit of time to get around to that I would kind of like to be in a different place in my life before I come back around to it, just so I can create more space for it again, and do it the justice I think it deserves. So that is the last book on my lineup, and I call this book KOTU. That is the series. It'll be right there. And I know it'll be 4 books because I already know the plot of every one of them, and it's going to be 4 books. So there's that one, my last fantasy book. Woo! All right, I tallied it up, and if the Rosewood Witch series is indeed 4 books. That makes this series about 18 books, or not series, that makes this video. That means that on my project log, I have approximately 18 books that I plan on writing. Wow, that's a lot. I didn't even know it was that many until I finished filming this video. Holy moly. That was all I wanted to talk with you guys about, was my projects. So like I said, this is not the order that I plan on publishing them in. Some of these will come and go and interweave themselves between each other, since a lot of them are series. I really like to write in series. It's also for indie authors anyway, it is just a good marketing technique because the books kind of sell themselves in that sense. There's already a hook there for the next one. But also, whenever I sit down to write a book, I have a really hard time just writing a standalone because I put so many details into my characters that it's kind of hard for me to let go of them and to see them in just the one scenario. So I like to write series. And this doesn't include any ideas that pop into my brain along the way and make it onto the project log, because every year I gain 1 or 2 new ideas that I add to this. So 2023, this project log could go from 18-ish books to 22-ish. Who knows? But we'll see. We'll see how many of those books come off the project log in 2023. I'm hoping 3. We will see. That's all I have for you guys today. Make sure that you're subscribed. Turn on that notification bell if you want to find out whenever I post. I post vlogs every single Sunday, and every Wednesday I try to post fun videos like this. Follow me on social media. Also, that's in the description box. I post every single day to TikTok and Instagram. I'm super active on there. Reach out to me. Let's talk about some books. And that's it. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.